As the sixth netta revealed in the Iunu Myth, Osiris represents the number 6. And if you've ever played with a compass, you'll know the perfect flower pattern it generates by simply moving the point around. Symbolically, this image represents the flowering of the hieroglyph for Ra. Hello and welcome back to my channel, where today we'll be taking a further look into the multidimensional cosmic law we call Osiris. And I say this because he's not to be taken as a historical figure, but rather as the personification of a cosmic law or netta that exists outside of space and time. And what my channel presents is how these laws were presented through the ancient Egyptian temple teaching, principally through the nettas and hieroglyphs, which they called the Medu nettas, or language of the nettas. What does it mean, the flowering of Ra? Well, as the creator of all that is, Ra, or God in the Western world, is pure love. And Osiris represents the principle of life that allows love to flourish in a physical living being. That's what you and every living creature are, physical manifestations of love in countless millions of forms. And this geometric flower pattern is the fruition of the mystical union of Osiris and Ra that occurs at midnight in the 6th hour of the duat. The flower is made up from segments of the hieroglyph for Ra, rearranged into one of the fundamental expressions of sacred geometry, which will later be developed by Osiris' son, Horus. Osiris represents the living entity that can breathe and move through space and time, like you and me. And he's intimately connected to his mother Nut, whose endless repetition we discovered in drawing that flower of life. So on the material plane, Osiris represents the cycle of life. And by default, that cycle also includes what we call death. Of all the nettas, Osiris is the only one who dies. Or at least that's how the texts have been interpreted by Western mind. And to us, death is a terminal experience. It literally marks the end of life. The mainstream also tells us that Egyptians were mesmerized by Osiris and obsessed with death, practicing elaborate rituals and making cults of the dead. But remember, that viewpoint was deliberately created by the late Victorian authorities to debase the ancient Egyptian culture in favor of Christianity. And unfortunately, it's still widely held today. However, like the planetary cycles of Nut, the Egyptians didn't have a word for death. They simply saw it as a transition called westerning, literally moving to the west, as Ra did before he disappeared or transitioned at sunset, knowing full well that he would reappear the next morning at sunrise. Death, then, marks the point where the Ouroboros snake swallows its own tail to complete the endless circle. This cycle is perfectly demonstrated by the grain of wheat. While buried, The grain will germinate, grow to maturity, ripen, then its seed will fall back into the ground, which completes its Osirian contract. Then the cycle will repeat again and again. The wheat seed became a natural symbol for Osiris, and wooden trays shaped in his profile were planted and watered for the grain to germinate, because for them Osiris was not associated with death, but with the resurrection that followed. The Egyptians were enamored of life, and Osiris brought the promise of eternal life through this same cycle that they saw repeated everywhere in nature. Seen in this light, death becomes a mystical process of transformation in preparation for further expansion. Because like the stars in the sky, there's no turning back, only forward movement. In another myth, Osiris is credited with teaching mankind the civilizing practice of raising crops and cattle to feed himself, by intervening with the natural cycle in a way that completely respects cosmic law, while it benefits both himself and the plant or animal concerned. For example, the wheat grain is harvested once the seeds have ripened, before they would naturally fall to the ground. Then the grain is threshed to separate the seeds from their papery sheaths. Then they're gathered and stored, some as food for the people, and the rest to be planted the following year. Thus the cycle continues. However, the quantity produced is greatly multiplied. When it comes to animals, most Westerners have a problem because they're so far removed from the idea of sacrifice that they've lost their understanding of it. But how it works is a pact or deal is made between the animal and the farmer, whereby the farmer takes full care of them, not only to feed and water them, but also giving them shelter to protect them from being killed and eaten by other animals, since most domestic animals and birds have little or no defense mechanisms. Then comes the difficult part, because at a certain point the animals are sacrificed, which is the fulfillment of the deal. The name of God must be invoked over the creature before the sacrifice can be made in a specifically prescribed manner. And I know this makes most of you squeamish, but at the same time you're happy to eat meat or poultry bought from the supermarket, not having a clue of how it got there. You can find many examples of agriculture and raising animals depicted in the tombs, but not in those of the king, because he has cultivated the Horus principle that awakens cosmic consciousness within himself. So the scenes in the royal tombs are perfect expressions of the different order of creation that he or she has become. This possibility of Osiris to transcend himself explains why he is the role model for the king, the one who has broken out of this endless cycle of repetition to enter into a new realm of existence. It's also why the king holds the crook and flail, the one for herding animals and the other for threshing the grain, which spiritually confirms that he has successfully aligned and purged himself for his new role. It also explains why Jesus was called the Good Shepherd, and why he was sacrificed, buried, and resurrected. In fact, the Egyptians saw Osiris much in the same way that we see the figure of Jesus, the one who resurrected and not the one who died. So what can we learn from all of this? The six-petaled flower carries the seed of Ra's gift of love buried in the heart of mankind, and the circular nature of its construction are tied to the ever-turning celestial movements of Nut. Such an awareness directly connects us with the rhythms of nature, which reveal the vital role of death not as an end, but as a necessary process to complete the cycle. With plants and animals, Osiris taught us acts of human kindness by showing us how to take care of each other and remind us that we humans are an integral part of the creation as a whole. On a higher level, it reveals that the point of death is the point that the Horus principle can develop from the mystical marriage of Ra and Osiris, which occurs at midnight in the unknown darkness of the duat. Indeed, all spiritual possibilities belong in the unknown. What we've already lived belongs to the past, and the future is unknown. And such is the flowering of Ra, as the lotus opens up to the sunlight. So to stay tuned for more, click the like and subscribe buttons and consider supporting the channel through the Buy Me a Coffee link you'll find in the description below. And as ever, thank you for watching.